As Anya continued to evolve, so did the world around it. While the village had become a beacon of hope and sustainability, the challenges of the 21st century, global economic shifts, environmental crises, and the ever-quickening pace of technological advancement, presented new hurdles. Yet, the same values that had brought Anya success in the first place, community, resilience, and innovation, remained the foundation upon which its future would be built. Kwesi and Amina often gathered the village leaders in Anya's now expansive community hall to discuss the future. There was an understanding that while success had been achieved, the journey was far from over. Anya was thriving, but the world around it was evolving at an astonishing rate. The younger generation, particularly Adama, Ni, and Aba, had proven themselves capable of leading Anya's next phase, but new challenges demanded fresh thinking. "I'm proud of what we've accomplished," Kwesi began one evening, standing at the front of the room. "But as the world changes, so must we. We've always been innovators, but innovation must now meet the challenges of an interconnected world. Our values of sustainability, community, and local empowerment will guide us, but we must be prepared to adapt." The room was filled with the sharp focus of those who had grown up watching Anya's transformation. The future was now in their hands. Ni, ever the advocate for resourceful solutions, raised an important issue. "Kwesi, we've built something beautiful here, but there are global challenges we cannot ignore. Climate change is affecting our crops, unpredictable weather patterns are taking a toll on fishing, and even our solar panels sometimes fail during long stretches of bad weather. How do we continue to thrive when the world itself is in turmoil?" Kwesi nodded, recognizing the importance of Ni's concerns. "This is where our greatest strength lies. It's not just about being resilient to one threat, but being adaptable to many. We've always had to face adversity, but we've done so as a community, with an open mind and open hearts. Now, we need to deepen our knowledge and look beyond what we've done." Climate change had begun to affect Anya more directly. In recent years, the village's farmers had noticed subtle but troubling changes in rainfall patterns, with unpredictable dry spells and unseasonable storms becoming more frequent. The cooperative's core agricultural practices, based on crop rotation, soil conservation, and natural pest control, had kept them sustainable, but the shifting climate was a serious threat. Adama, having spent years studying the impacts of climate change on agriculture, was quick to propose solutions. "We must start by diversifying our crops. Some varieties of maize, cassava, and rice have been susceptible to the changing climate. We should explore drought-resistant crops and implement agroforestry practices, where we grow trees alongside our crops to protect the soil and reduce erosion." Her proposal was met with a wave of support. The idea was rooted in traditional farming practices, where people understood that the land could not be farmed without care. But now, with the added challenge of climate change, the cooperative needed to introduce new crops and techniques that could withstand erratic weather. In the coming months, Adama worked closely with the community to identify drought-resistant varieties of millet, sorghum, and beans that could withstand longer dry spells. They also began planting trees such as baobabs, which are resilient to dry conditions and could help protect the soil. The cooperative launched an ambitious program to incorporate agroforestry into their agricultural strategy, blending the old with the new to ensure future food security. ABA, always quick to see opportunities, saw that renewable energy could play a role in mitigating some of these environmental challenges. "We need to expand our use of solar-powered irrigation systems," he suggested. "But more importantly, we can explore the potential of wind and hydropower. We have the technology and resources, we need to think more broadly." Ni, who had been experimenting with solar energy solutions for the fishing community, agreed. "We should build a network of microgrids, powered not only by solar but by wind and water. Our fishing villages often experience strong winds, and the rivers could be harnessed for hydropower. Let's make Anya energy independent." The youth's forward-thinking approach was exactly what the cooperative needed. By the end of the year, Anya had installed several wind turbines along its coastal areas, and small hydroelectric generators were placed along the rivers. The community's energy needs were now met by a mix of solar, wind, and water power, ensuring a reliable, sustainable source of energy no matter the weather. As Anya's sustainability grew, it faced new challenges in the global marketplace. The cooperative had become well known for its fair trade principles, but with global trade dynamics constantly shifting, especially in light of economic uncertainties and changing demand, Anya needed to find new markets for its products. Kofi, the cooperative's financial strategist, had long been aware of the need for diversification. "We've done well in fair trade, but the market is becoming saturated. We must expand into new areas," he told the team. "The world is looking for products that are not only sustainable, but also innovative. Anya can offer that." After much deliberation, the cooperative set its sights on sustainable fashion. The rich culture of Anya's artisans, combined with its growing textile industry, made it a perfect fit for the global demand for eco-friendly fashion. ABA, who had worked with traditional weavers, suggested that they introduce a new line of clothing made from organic cotton grown by Anya's farmers, combined with handwoven fabrics produced by the village's artisans. "We already know how to grow and harvest cotton sustainably. Now, we just need to ensure that our clothing is designed in a way that captures the attention of the international fashion market," ABA said. "Our artisans have incredible skills, and this could be the next chapter for Anya's legacy." The cooperative worked with fashion designers from around the world to launch a collection of clothing that celebrated African heritage, while also embracing eco-conscious design. The line was featured in major fashion shows and, within a year, Anya's brand was recognized internationally as a symbol of both sustainability and craftsmanship. The success of the clothing line helped the cooperative maintain its financial independence and supported further growth in other areas. It allowed the village to continue its work on the ground, ensuring that local projects in agriculture, energy, and education remained funded. As Anya continued to grow, the importance of education became ever clearer. The cooperative's education center, now recognized as one of the leading institutions in the region, expanded its curriculum to include advanced courses on renewable energy, environmental science, sustainable business practices, and global markets. Nia, now a senior member of the leadership team, had always believed in the power of education to drive change. "We cannot afford to let the next generation fall behind," she often said. "Anya's future will depend on how we educate our young people today. This community has always been built on knowledge, now we need to make sure that knowledge is global in scope." The center began to offer scholarships for students from surrounding villages, ensuring that the cooperative's values would spread even further. Nia worked tirelessly to establish partnerships with international universities, allowing students from Anya to study abroad and return with the knowledge and skills to contribute to the village's future. As Kwesi sat one evening overlooking the bustling village, the sounds of children playing in the fields and the hum of solar-powered equipment filling the air, he reflected on the journey Anya had undertaken. From a small, struggling community to a globally recognized model for sustainable development, the cooperative had defied the odds. Yet, the challenges ahead were just as daunting as those they had overcome. Anya had never been about easy answers or quick fixes. It was a community built on values that went beyond economic success, the value of collaboration, of innovation, and of the belief that people, when united by a common purpose, could overcome anything. Kwesi had nurtured this vision, but now, it was in the hands of the next generation. "Anya will continue to grow," Kwesi said softly to Madame Abina, who sat beside him. "Not because we've built something that can't be undone, but because we've created a foundation that will always adapt, evolve, and inspire." Madame Abina smiled, her eyes filled with wisdom. "And the winds of change will carry us forward, Kwesi. But the roots will always remain, deep in the soil of Anya." The legacy of Anya had become a testament not just to one village, but to the power of people who believed in their own potential. And as the winds of change continued to blow, they would remain firmly planted in the values that had brought them this far. As the years unfolded, Anya's cooperative became a living testament to the possibility of transformation, of how a community, grounded in values of unity, sustainability, and innovation, could rise from the most humble beginnings to become a force that impacted the world. Anya had not just survived, it had thrived, and its story had sparked a global movement. But as with any journey, new challenges arose, and new horizons had to be explored. Kwesi, now in his mid-50s, continued to be the guiding force behind the cooperative, but as time went on, he understood that Anya's future would no longer be solely his to shape. It was time to embrace a broader vision, one that saw Anya not only as a model for rural development but as a central player in the global push for sustainability and social justice. This chapter explores how Anya's influence began to ripple across the world and how the cooperative faced the growing challenges of global expansion, while still holding on to the essence of its roots. By the time Kwesi reached his 50s, the cooperative's success had transcended the boundaries of Anya. People from around the world had taken note of the village's accomplishments, and requests for Anya to share its model of development came pouring in. Whether from fellow African nations, Asian countries, or even parts of South America, the story of Anya was one that resonated deeply with people who saw in it a path towards sustainable growth that could uplift entire communities. Anya's cooperative had grown into a symbol of hope, not just for rural Africa but for marginalized communities everywhere. The blend of traditional practices with modern solutions, whether in agriculture, renewable energy, or education, had proven that change didn't require abandoning the old ways but adapting them to modern challenges. It was in the global spotlight that Anya found itself once again tested. At an international conference on sustainable development in Paris, Amina, Kofi, and Adama stood before a crowd of business leaders, activists, and policymakers. The village's story had captured the world's attention, and now they were being asked to share how Anya had managed to overcome its challenges and become a beacon of progress. "There's no simple answer," Amina began, her voice steady yet passionate. "What you see in Anya is the result of decades of effort, a collective vision, and a belief that community can shape its own future. We've always believed that the foundation of success is rooted in people, not in money or technology alone." She continued, "We've taken the principles of sustainability and applied them to every aspect of life in Anya: agriculture, energy, education, and even trade. But we've also stayed true to the spirit of community. No one in Anya is left behind. We rise together, or we don't rise at all." The response was overwhelming. People approached them after the talk, eager to learn how they could apply the same principles to their own communities. The ripple effect had begun. Anya was no longer just a village, it was the heart of a global movement that celebrated human ingenuity, collaboration, and respect for the earth. As Anya's influence grew, so too did the pressure to expand its operations. The cooperative had begun as a small, village-based initiative, but now it was a network of enterprises with ties to markets around the world. The cooperative had branches in several neighboring countries, and its influence stretched across Africa, with growing partnerships in Europe and Asia. However, with expansion came challenges, ones that even Anya's model of unity and sustainability could not easily resolve. One of the most significant challenges was maintaining the integrity of the cooperative's values as it grew. What had made Anya successful was its deep commitment to community and ethical practices. But in the global marketplace, competition, profit margins, and the pressures of corporate partnerships often presented conflicts of interest. How could Anya ensure that its growth didn't compromise its values? Kwesi sat with Amina, Kofi, and Adama one evening, as they reviewed proposals for expansion into new markets. "We cannot forget what got us here," Kwesi said, his voice heavy with concern. "We've grown because we've maintained our focus on people. We must ensure that we never sacrifice that in the name of expansion." Amina, always the pragmatic one, agreed but also saw the necessity of balance. "I understand the concern, Kwesi. But we cannot close ourselves off from the world either. We have to navigate these waters carefully, with integrity, so that Anya's success can inspire others without compromising what makes us different." Adama, who had seen how Anya's agricultural practices had improved through global collaboration, added, "Perhaps this is an opportunity for us to lead by example. We've always talked about sustainability. Let's ensure that any new partnerships we form are aligned with those values. We don't need to abandon our principles to expand, we just need to choose our partners wisely." The group agreed that the next phase of Anya's growth would involve carefully vetting international partners, ensuring that the values of sustainability, fair trade, and social equity remained at the forefront of every decision. While the cooperative could no longer function as a small village operation, it could still operate like a community, prioritizing the well-being of the people over short-term profits. With a clearer vision in mind, Anya began to scale its operations globally without compromising its core values. The cooperative began working on establishing a new branch of the organization focused on empowering other communities to build their own sustainable economies. This initiative, known as the Anya Model for Sustainable Development, was designed to help other villages and small towns across the world adopt Anya's principles of community-led growth. The Anya Model was not about imposing a one-size-fits-all solution. Rather, it was about empowering each community to find its own path, using the resources and traditions available to them. Anya's role was to offer guidance, support, and training, and to create a network of communities that could learn from one another's successes and mistakes. Amina led the initiative, working with local leaders from several countries to help them adapt the cooperative model to their own needs. In countries like Kenya, India, and Peru, Anya's team worked with rural farmers, fishermen, and artisans, providing training in sustainable agricultural practices, renewable energy, and business development. Adama's work in agriculture also expanded as she collaborated with universities and agricultural research organizations worldwide. She helped to develop crop varieties that were not only more resistant to climate change, but also suited to a variety of different environments. Her research, backed by Anya's network, was changing the way the world viewed farming, not as a static, traditional industry but as a dynamic, evolving field that could meet the challenges of the future. As the cooperative flourished, Kwesi began to step back from the day-to-day leadership, though his influence continued to guide the organization. The next generation, Amina, Kofi, Adama, Ni, and others, had taken the reins, and Anya was thriving in a new era. Kwesi knew that the legacy he had built was no longer just about the village of Anya, it was about a movement that transcended borders and brought hope to countless people around the world. He had once dreamed of a small village that could overcome poverty and isolation through the power of community. Now, that dream was a global reality. As he stood by the village's solar-powered water wells, watching children fetch clean water from a source that had once been contaminated, Kwesi realized that Anya had not just changed his life, it had changed the lives of everyone who had touched it. The community had become a model of what was possible when people united in purpose and worked together. Anya was no longer just a place, it was a symbol of hope, of resilience, and of the belief that, with the right values, anything was possible. As Anya continued to grow, it began to experience the natural tension that comes with rapid success. The village, once a tight-knit community with a shared vision, now found itself balancing between the intimacy of its origins and the vast reach of its expanding influence. The cooperative's values were stronger than ever, but the new challenges demanded that even those most familiar with its foundation rethink their approach to leadership. This chapter delves into the deeper philosophical questions faced by Anya's leaders as they reflect on the evolving identity of the village and the cooperative. It also explores the new leadership structure and the tensions that arise when personal dreams and communal ambitions collide. By now, Anya had grown far beyond the small rural village it once was. While it had maintained its reputation as a model of sustainability, the sheer scale of its success brought about new complexities. The cooperative had expanded its operations across multiple continents, establishing partnerships with governments, NGOs, and multinational corporations. It was a beacon for sustainable development, but with that global attention came a shift in leadership. Kwesi, now in his late 50s, had always been the emotional and ideological anchor of the community. His vision had driven Anya from its humble beginnings to its current status. Yet, as Anya expanded into international markets and became an influential player in the global sustainability conversation, Kwesi began to feel a subtle disconnect. His leadership had been essential, but he knew the time had come for the next generation to step up, not just to preserve Anya's legacy, but to adapt it for the future. In a meeting with the core leadership team, which now included younger members like Ni, Adama, and ABA, Kwesi spoke openly about his feelings. I have seen this village grow in ways I never imagined, Kwesi began, his voice filled with both pride and reflection. But I think we have reached a point where Anya needs a new vision, one that embraces the global, not just the local. I've done my part, but I believe it's time for you all to take the reins and shape Anya for the future. Amina, who had been at his side for many years, nodded solemnly. We know you've laid the foundation, Kwesi. But we also see the need to rethink the direction we're going in. Anya is no longer just a village. It's a movement. And movements evolve. The transition of leadership was not a simple matter. There were differences of opinion among the leaders, particularly with the younger generation, as they each had their own visions for Anya's future. Some, like Adama, believed that the cooperative should focus on deepening its impact in agriculture, ensuring food security across Africa and beyond. Others, like me, were more focused on Anya becoming a global voice in the renewable energy and technology space. While Kwesi's departure from active leadership was not yet a certainty, the decision was looming. He had watched his village grow and change, but now, as Anya's global footprint expanded, there was an undeniable tension: how to remain grounded in the cooperative's origins while navigating the shifting dynamics of global influence. While the leadership transition loomed, there was one thing that united the team: Anya's core values. The cooperative had always been about more than just economic growth, it was a social experiment in community-led change. Kwesi's vision had always been about making sure that no one was left behind, that every member of the cooperative had a stake in its success. Yet, as the cooperative grew, maintaining the sense of shared purpose had become a challenge. The world was watching, and with global success came a desire for recognition and power, things that had never been the focus of the village before. Some in the leadership felt torn between maintaining the cooperative's integrity and embracing the rewards that came with success. Adama, who had spent much of her career focused on the environmental sustainability of Anya, was particularly concerned about how Anya's global expansion might compromise its principles. She had witnessed firsthand the pressures that came with growth: financial interests, international business partners, and the desire to appease investors. All of these things, she feared, could eventually cause Anya to lose its soul. We cannot afford to forget where we came from, Adama often reminded the team. We fought too long for the people here. Our mission has always been to protect the land, empower the people, and maintain our traditional values. The moment we lose sight of that, we lose everything. While Amina agreed, she was also aware of the realities of the global marketplace. Adama, I know your concerns. But we are at a crossroads. We can't continue to ignore the outside world. We've worked hard to build a model that works, now we need to share it on a larger scale. There are people who need our help. It was a delicate balance. Adama's fears were valid. With every new partnership, there was a risk of diluting Anya's principles. But at the same time, Amina was right, the world needed Anya. Its example of sustainability, community-led growth, and ethical leadership had become a beacon for countless others. If Anya's impact could be amplified, its message could change the way global markets operated. Despite the challenges that came with scaling the cooperative, the leadership remained resolute in maintaining Anya's identity. They decided to return to the roots of the village, to help ground themselves in the values that had made them successful. Kwesi suggested a journey back to the original heart of Anya, the first plot of land where the village's elders had gathered to discuss the future, where the cooperative's first crops were planted, and where the original gathering circle had been formed. It was here, in this sacred space, that the village's vision had taken shape. As they walked through the now expansive village and approached the familiar spot, the leaders reflected on the path they had taken. This is where it all began, Kwesi said, his voice filled with nostalgia. This place holds the energy and spirit of everything we've worked for. It's a reminder of what we stand for. The group sat together in the circle, quietly reflecting on the past, present, and future of Anya. The sounds of children playing, the sight of the solar field stretching across the land, and the vibrant marketplaces all reminded them of the village's incredible journey. We've accomplished so much, Amina said, but we cannot lose ourselves. Anya is more than just a name, it is a living idea. It is the heartbeat of all who are connected to it. As we step into this new phase, we must protect that heartbeat. Adama nodded. We must protect it, but we must also let it grow. It can't remain a small village forever. The world needs Anya's heart, and it's our duty to share it with others. Kwesi smiled, looking at the young leaders who now carried the weight of the cooperative's future. You are the heart of Anya now. It is your time to carry it forward, to make sure it beats stronger than ever. As Anya continued to expand its reach, its leaders worked diligently to ensure that its values were never lost. The cooperative established a rigorous set of guiding principles, which all international partnerships had to adhere to, ensuring that Anya's commitment to sustainability, community empowerment, and ethical practices remained intact. Anya's global model for sustainable development gained traction. Countries and organizations around the world sought to learn from its success. But for Kwesi and the other leaders, their greatest achievement was not the accolades, nor the recognition, but the knowledge that Anya had not only changed their village, it had changed the world. As Kwesi looked at the younger generation of leaders, he knew that the heartbeat of Anya would continue to echo far beyond the borders of the village. The cooperative had become a living testament to the power of unity, resilience, and vision. And no matter how far Anya traveled, its heartbeat would always return to the land that had nurtured it. As the cooperative's reach expanded and its global presence solidified, Anya was faced with new challenges, some predictable, others completely unforeseen. The more they grew, the more they were tested, not just by external forces, but by the very principles that had made the cooperative so unique. This chapter explores the rising tensions between the ideals of Anya and the pressures of the outside world, as well as the internal struggles that threatened to tear the community apart. It was an unusually hot day when the first cracks in the unity of Anya began to show. The villagers had always prided themselves on their togetherness, but as their success reached new heights, it was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain the same level of connection they once had. The cooperative, while still deeply rooted in the village, had grown to involve numerous international stakeholders, and this new web of relationships brought with it an array of differing opinions, priorities, and expectations. Aminata, a longtime member of the cooperative, had always been a vocal supporter of its vision, but she had begun to voice concerns in private. She felt the cooperative's leadership was becoming increasingly distant from the community's needs. The focus is shifting too much toward profits, she told Amina one evening, after the day's meetings with international partners. We started with a clear vision of helping the people, but now it feels like we're losing touch with what really matters. Amina was taken aback by the comment. She had always prided herself on her ability to listen to the people of Anya, but Aminata's words had struck a chord. While she had always believed that expansion and success could bring greater opportunities for the village, the pressure to grow often meant focusing on the numbers. In the race to compete globally, sometimes the local needs were drowned out. Are you saying we should stop growing? Amina asked, unsure of how to respond. No, Aminata replied firmly, but we need to remember that the cooperative was built on the idea that we rise together, as a community. Growth should benefit everyone, not just the shareholders and international partners. If we forget the heart of what made Anya strong, we risk losing everything. Amina sat quietly, contemplating the words. Aminata had been one of the original members, someone who had worked tirelessly from the beginning to create the vision that had led to Anya's success. If she was beginning to feel disconnected, it was a sign that something was wrong. The challenges in Anya were no longer just external, coming from the forces of global business and development. They were also internal, as the village's leaders began to confront the reality that their growth might compromise the very values they held dear. The leadership team had never been so divided. While Amina, Adama, and Ni pushed forward with expanding the cooperative's influence, Kofi and some of the older members of the team began to question whether they were losing sight of their original mission. We cannot keep up with the world's demands and maintain our integrity, Kofi argued one evening, after an intense round of meetings with multinational investors. These businesses are not here to protect our values. They want profits, and they will change our approach to suit their needs. we need to ask ourselves, at what cost are we growing? Kwesi, always a calm and reflective presence, had been silent during most of the meetings. He had spent his entire life guiding the village and the cooperative, but even he was beginning to feel the weight of the situation. The concerns that Kofi raised were not unfounded. The cooperative's expansion had led them to make compromises, small at first, but growing larger over time. They had made agreements with corporations that did not share their ideals entirely, agreeing to terms that sometimes undermined their environmental goals. Kwesi spoke, his voice grave. The question is not whether we grow or not, but how we grow. We need to ensure that as we expand, we stay true to our roots. The cooperative was never about just numbers or profits. It was about creating a future for our people. Amina nodded but knew the complexity of the situation. I agree, but the world is moving quickly. If we don't seize the opportunities now, we risk being left behind. A deep silence filled the room as the leadership team mulled over their next steps. The tension between preservation and progress was palpable. They could no longer pretend that there was a simple answer to their challenges. Anya was at a crossroads. Meanwhile, within the village itself, whispers of discontent were beginning to spread. Many of the original members of the cooperative, who had fought for years to establish Anya, were becoming increasingly frustrated. They had given so much to the cooperative and expected that the fruits of their labor would benefit the entire community. Yet, as they saw new investments flowing in and international partners securing bigger stakes, they began to feel that their voices were being ignored. It was during a community gathering, where the villagers would come together to discuss the future of the cooperative, that the true scale of the discontent became clear. The gathering was filled with old faces, men and women who had worked tirelessly in the early days to get the cooperative off the ground. Kwesi, Amina, Adama, and the others stood before the people, ready to address the concerns of the community. The room was tense, filled with murmurs. Finally, a man named Barima, a respected elder and one of the original founders, stood up. He had worked alongside Kwesi from the very beginning, and his words carried weight. We've built something extraordinary here, but I fear we are losing touch with our people, Barima said, his voice strong but weary. We worked hard for what we have, and it wasn't for investors or foreign businesses. It was for our children, our grandchildren, for everyone here. We cannot forget the heart of Anya. We cannot allow our growth to take away the very things that made us who we are. The crowd nodded in agreement, some members even clapping in support. It was clear that the tension between the leadership's vision and the community's desires had reached a boiling point. Amina, who had been listening carefully, stepped forward. I hear your concerns, and they are valid. We built Anya together, and we will continue to protect what makes this village special. But we must also grow. We cannot stay stagnant. The world needs to see what we have done here, and we need to make sure that our model of sustainability and empowerment can reach others. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. But that doesn't mean we lose ourselves in the process. We will find a way to balance growth with our values. That is my promise to you. After the tense meeting, the leadership team came together to reflect on Barima's words. They knew that if they were to continue leading Anya through its transformation, they needed to be more transparent with the community and involve them more in the decision-making process. Kwesi, who had always been the steady hand guiding the cooperative, finally spoke up. The people are right. We have forgotten the foundation on which this cooperative was built. We need to find a way to bring the community into this next phase of growth. With that, they decided to create a new council, an advisory board made up of both younger and older members of the cooperative, including the original founders and the new generation of leaders. This council would ensure that every decision made for Anya, whether local or global, had the input of the community and stayed true to their values. They also committed to revisiting their partnership agreements with international investors and corporations. From now on, every new partner would have to meet a set of rigorous ethical standards. The cooperative's growth would not come at the cost of its people, its land, or its values. In the end, the winds of change had not broken Anya. They had redirected its course, bringing the cooperative back to its original mission while still embracing the future. Anya's leaders had found a way to grow without losing sight of what made the village great. It was a hard lesson, but it was one that would define their legacy for years to come. Anya had become a symbol not just of sustainable development, but of resilience, of a community that, despite the pressures of the outside world, had stayed true to its heart. The sun set gently over Anya, casting a warm golden light across the sprawling fields that had once been the humble beginnings of the cooperative. The vast fields of crops, renewable energy projects, and thriving businesses were all now a testament to the vision that had begun with just a few brave individuals. As the village continued to evolve and prosper, the question of legacy began to weigh heavily on the shoulders of its leaders. While Anya's growth was a clear success, there was one crucial issue that could not be ignored: the passing of time and the long-term sustainability of their efforts. Kwesi, Amina, and the other leaders knew that their responsibility was not just to ensure the success of the cooperative today, but to safeguard its future for generations to come. This chapter explores the journey of Anya's leaders as they reflect on their achievements, the challenges of preserving the cooperative's integrity, and their enduring responsibility to the land and people they had sworn to protect. It was a quiet morning when Kwesi called the leaders together for a meeting at the old village center, the same spot where the cooperative's first plans had been drawn, where the elders had gathered in the early days. Now, it was a place of reflection, where the past, present, and future could all come together in one place. "We've come far," Kwesi began, his voice calm but tinged with the weight of experience. "But we cannot rest on our laurels. The work we've done here is only the beginning. We have created something beautiful, but now we must protect it for those who will come after us." Amina, now a senior leader within the cooperative, nodded thoughtfully. The growth of Anya had brought its own set of complexities, from navigating global partnerships to ensuring that the principles of sustainability and community empowerment remained at the core of everything they did. But she also knew that there was a risk of forgetting the lessons they had learned along the way. She had witnessed firsthand the dangers of rushing into global expansion without considering the long-term effects. "Kwesi is right," Amina said. "The future of Anya depends on how we pass on what we've built. We have set a precedent for sustainable development, but we have to ask ourselves, how will future generations sustain this vision? How will they adapt it in ways we haven't even thought of?" Her words hung in the air, and the room fell silent as the leadership team considered the question. It was one thing to build something strong, it was another to make sure it endured over time, evolving with the changing needs of the world while remaining true to its roots. As part of Anya's long-term vision, it became clear that ensuring the cooperative's principles were passed down to future generations was essential. The village had always prioritized education, but now, with the influence of the cooperative reaching beyond its borders, the need for a new kind of learning had emerged. Adama, who had spent most of her time focused on the environmental sustainability of Anya, proposed a new initiative, the creation of a leadership academy within the cooperative. This academy would not only teach young members of the village about sustainable practices, agriculture, and renewable energy, but it would also impart lessons about leadership, ethics, and community building. It would be a place where Anya's values could be passed on in a formalized way, ensuring that the cooperative's ideals were carried forward for generations. "We have to ensure that the next generation understands the responsibility they hold," Adama explained during one of the leadership meetings. "They won't just inherit our successes, they'll inherit our struggles too. And we need to make sure they are equipped to face them with wisdom, humility, and compassion." The idea of the academy was well received. It would be a place where young people from Anya could learn not only practical skills, but also the philosophical underpinnings that had guided the cooperative from its inception. These lessons would cover everything from the importance of land stewardship to the ethics of trade, and most importantly, the need for a balance between progress and preservation. As the academy was being established, another significant issue arose: the health of the land. Over the years, the cooperative's success had been fueled by the sustainable farming practices they had implemented. But with the increasing demand for agricultural output and the expansion of Anya's reach, the land itself began to show signs of strain. The soil that had once been rich and abundant now seemed less fertile in certain areas, and the water supply, which had been carefully managed, was beginning to feel the pressure of so much growth. Amina, who had always been deeply connected to the land, felt a profound sense of urgency. "We've always known that the earth has a voice," she said during a meeting with the leadership team. "It tells us when it's been overworked. It tells us when it needs time to heal. And right now, it's asking for help." The cooperative had always practiced organic farming, but the scale of production was beginning to take its toll. Amina suggested that they implement a system of regenerative agriculture, which focused on rebuilding the soil and increasing biodiversity. This approach would be more time-consuming and would require a temporary reduction in crop yields, but it was the only way to ensure the long-term health of the land. Kofi, who had long been a proponent of traditional farming techniques, was quick to support the idea. "We've relied on the wisdom of our ancestors for centuries. It's time we go back to those roots, to the practices that sustained us long before we knew anything about international trade or global markets." The leadership team agreed that a more holistic approach to farming was necessary, one that would involve not only regenerating the soil, but also reintroducing native species of plants and animals that had been pushed out by industrial farming techniques. It would require cooperation from every member of the cooperative, but it was a decision they were willing to make, not just for their own future, but for the generations that would inherit the land. As Anya's leadership focused on nurturing the land and securing the cooperative's future, they also realized that their vision could be a blueprint for other communities around the world. The cooperative's model had proven successful in the face of global challenges, and now it was time to expand its impact even further. Kwesi, reflecting on the journey, shared his thoughts with the leadership team. "We have proven that it is possible to create a sustainable, community-driven economy. But the world is still struggling with inequality, environmental degradation, and corporate greed. Anya can be a beacon for those who want to change the system." The cooperative decided to expand its educational and advisory services to other communities, particularly those in Africa and parts of the global south. Anya would help establish more cooperative models based on its principles, empowering local communities to take control of their own destinies and build sustainable futures. "We've proven that it works," Kwesi said. "Now it's time to show the world that these principles can be applied everywhere. From here on out, we'll not only focus on growing Anya, but on growing the movement." As the years passed, the Leadership Academy thrived, and the regenerative farming practices began to show results. The land healed, and Anya's influence continued to spread across the globe. What had started as a small village had become a global movement, demonstrating the power of community, sustainability, and ethical leadership. The legacy of Anya, however, was not just in its business success or global recognition, it was in the way it had transformed the lives of its people. Every person who had worked in the cooperative had a stake in its success. They had seen firsthand the power of unity, of working together for a common cause. They had redefined what it meant to prosper, not by hoarding wealth, but by lifting each other up. In the end, Anya had done more than just change the village, it had changed the way the world thought about development. It had proven that true success comes not from wealth alone, but from creating a future where every person, every family, and every community can thrive in harmony with the land. As the sun set once again over Anya, Kwesi looked out at the horizon, content in the knowledge that the cooperative's heart would continue to beat, not just for the present, but for generations yet to come. The future was bright, and the legacy was secure. The sun rose slowly over Anya, its golden light spilling across the fields where the cooperative's work had begun. The land, once barren and weary from years of exploitation, now thrived in abundance, a symbol of resilience and regeneration. The village was more than just a community, it had become a symbol of hope and possibility for the future of sustainable development. Yet, as the seasons changed, so too did the dreams of the people who had built Anya from the ground up. This final chapter is about the culmination of the cooperative's journey and the legacy left behind by the leaders who guided it. It is a reflection on what it means to build something that transcends time, the importance of mentorship, and how the cycle of life continues through those who inherit the torch of leadership. It had been a decade since the cooperative had expanded its reach and become a force for change, not only in Anya, but across the globe. Amina, now an elder within the leadership team, sat on the porch of her home, watching the horizon. The weight of the years was on her shoulders, but there was also a sense of peace. She had worked tirelessly to ensure the cooperative's growth, but now, as the future beckoned, she knew it was time to pass the torch to the younger generation. Kwesi, Adama, and Ni had all been instrumental in the cooperative's growth, but now they too were stepping back, allowing the next wave of leaders to take their place. The decision had not come easily. None of them had been prepared for the emotional toll of stepping away from something they had built with their own hands. But the truth was clear: the cooperative could not remain stagnant, and leadership must evolve. "We've seen the world change in ways we could never have imagined," Amina said softly, her voice carrying the wisdom of years. "But one thing remains constant: the need for community. The need to be connected to one another and to the land. We've built something extraordinary, but now it's time for the younger ones to carry it forward." Amina had watched as her own children grew, receiving education in the leadership academy she had helped establish. Her son, Kofi Jr., was now a young man, a graduate of the academy, and his passion for the cooperative's mission had always been evident. He had the same fire that had burned in his mother's heart when she had first joined the cooperative, and Amina knew he was ready. "I'm proud of you, my son," Amina said as Kofi Jr. sat beside her on the porch. "You've seen what we've built, and now you must take it to new heights. Remember, leadership is not just about making decisions, it's about listening to the people, understanding their needs, and ensuring that their voices are heard." Kofi Jr. nodded, his expression a mix of gratitude and responsibility. "I understand, Mother. I will do my best to honor the legacy you've built and continue the work you started." It was a bittersweet moment, as Amina realized that the time had come for the next generation to lead. She had done what she could, and now it was up to Kofi Jr. and the other young leaders to shape the future of Anya. Kofi Jr., along with several other young leaders who had emerged from the academy, had assumed their roles in the cooperative's leadership. They were eager to take Anya to new heights, but they were also keenly aware of the heavy responsibility that came with their new roles. The challenges ahead were many, and there was no clear roadmap to follow. Under the guidance of the elders, they had learned the importance of sustainability, unity, and community-driven development. But now they had to adapt to an ever-changing world, one that was increasingly interconnected and fast-paced. The global market, once a distant concern, was now a reality they had to navigate daily. Kofi Jr. and his team worked tirelessly to ensure that Anya's principles of equity, environmental sustainability, and community empowerment remained at the forefront of every decision. But they also had to balance these ideals with the demands of global partnerships, technological advancements, and the rapid pace of development. "Progress doesn't mean abandoning our roots," Kofi Jr. often reminded his team. "It means evolving with the times while staying true to the values that brought us here." To ensure that the cooperative remained firmly grounded in its original mission, the new leadership team decided to implement a new policy of guided expansion. Instead of pursuing growth at any cost, they would carefully evaluate each opportunity and only partner with organizations whose values aligned with those of Anya. One of the first major decisions they made was to establish a sister cooperative in a neighboring village, where Anya's principles of sustainable development and community building could be shared and replicated. The project was a resounding success, further solidifying Anya's reputation as a global leader in sustainable and ethical development. As time passed, the original leaders of the cooperative began to fade into the background. Kwesi, now an elder himself, had retired from active leadership but remained a cherished advisor. His wisdom and experience were invaluable, but he knew that it was time for him to step back and allow the younger generation to lead. "I have lived a full life," Kwesi said one evening as he sat with Amina, watching the sunset over the village. "I have seen Anya grow from a small, struggling community to a beacon of hope for the world. I have nothing left to prove." Amina nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "And you've done more than any of us could have dreamed. You've built something that will outlast all of us." Kwesi smiled, the lines on his face softening. It's not about what we built. It's about what we leave behind. We've created a foundation for the future, but now it's up to the next generation to build on it. The final days of the elders were marked by quiet reflection. They had seen their dreams come to fruition, and now it was time for them to step aside and let the younger leaders take Anya into the future. Their legacy was secure, but they knew that their work would never truly be finished. The cooperative would continue to grow, evolve, and adapt, as it always had, driven by the values that had guided them from the very beginning. The cooperative had not only transformed Anya but had inspired countless other villages around the world to embrace sustainable development. Anya became a living example of what could be achieved when communities came together, stayed true to their values, and embraced change. The Leadership Academy continued to thrive, producing generations of young leaders who would carry the torch of sustainability, justice, and empowerment forward. As the years passed, the land of Anya remained as fertile as ever. The crops grew tall and strong, the energy projects continued to power the village, and the community remained united. The cooperative had weathered storms, overcome challenges, and proven that sustainable development was not just a dream, but a reality. Anya's legacy was not just in its wealth or global influence, it was in the way the cooperative had transformed the lives of its people. It had shown that true success came not from individual gain but from collective effort. It had demonstrated that when people came together, when they cared for one another and for the land, they could build something that lasted, something that would continue to grow and thrive for generations to come. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Anya stood as a beacon for the world, a testament to the power of community, the importance of leadership, and the enduring promise of a better future. As the years passed and the village flourished under the guidance of the new generation, Anya became a symbol of hope for those who sought to build a better world. Its leaders continued to inspire others, showing that the path to progress did not have to come at the expense of the earth or the people who called it home. The cycle of life in Anya was complete, but it was also just beginning, as new generations rose to take the place of their elders, ready to face the challenges of a changing world, armed with the wisdom of the past and the hope for the future. The story of Anya was not just the story of a cooperative, it was the story of a community that had dared to dream, to grow, and to lead. It was a story that would live on for generations, passed down through the winds that whispered across the land and the hearts of those who carried its message forward. And so, the circle of life continued. The village of Anya was no longer just a place on a map. It had become a living, breathing testament to the power of unity, the strength of the human spirit, and the endless possibilities of a future built together.